Hello again. We are going to continue the fun with 2.3. I'm actually going to split this into 2 days. I don't know if your teacher did that or not, but I'm going to go up to here. And then I'm going to do this as a day 2 video. So if your teacher did all of it in one day, you're going to have the joy of watching 2 separate videos. So you're welcome for that. All right, this is something that you should have done in the past, but again, we're kind of revisiting it. You had geometry, so it can make it tricky to remember every single thing in the world. Slope-intercept form of an equation is so important. We use it all the time. So what you want to remember is that we're kind of calling it what it is. We're calling it slope-intercept form because M represents the slope or the steepness of the line, and B is representing your y-intercept, so specifically where it crosses the y-axis. So this is kind of like your starting point. If you're going to graph, start here on the y-axis. And then slope kind of tells you how to move. Are you going to move up and over, down and over? Because again, it's rise over run. So in these problems, it says to give the slope, which is the M value, comes in front of the X, and then the y-intercept of each line. So the slope of this line would be the one that's in front of this, so -4/3. And the y-intercept, and I don't know how picky your teacher is going to be about that, is going to be at 0, 2. Because technically the y-intercept is a point on the y-axis. So if you have a slope of -4/3, remember that means you're going to move down since it's -4 and then over 3. And when you're moving over, you're always moving to the right. So I'm going to go over here and pretend I'm graphing that. So I would start at 2 on the y-axis, and then I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1, 2, 3. And then I can keep going if I want to make my line straight, or I can use notability because it's brilliant. It makes my line straight for me. Awesome. So I went down 4 over 3 to get there. Okay, so in this next one, my slope is going to be 5, and my y-intercept is going to be 0, -7.5. So you'd count down 7.5, and then from there go up 5 because it's positive, and then over 1. So that one would be pretty steep because if you're at a point and you count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you only go over 1, you end up with a pretty steep line, and it is positive, so it goes up from left to right. So that's slope-intercept form, and then the other form that you're going to be asked to know is called standard form. Standard form is when you have like a number in front of X. So I'll just show you an example. Like say I had 2x minus 3y equals 6. This is what they mean when they say ax, by, and c. They're just the numbers in front of the x and y, and then a constant, meaning just a number on the right. Now, ideally, you want to have no fractions with this, meaning you're not going to have a 1/2 x. And so you're going to have to use some big brain cells to get rid of those. With these, we try to figure out where it's going to cross the x and where it's going to cross the y. That makes them kind of easier to graph later on. This is helpful, I guess, if you have the formula in front of your face, but it's also kind of can be confusing to try to memorize. What it's saying is if you want to figure out where it's going to cross the x-axis, everything on the x-axis has a 0 in the y spot. And then if you're trying to figure out the y-intercept where it's going to cross the y-axis, everything in the y-axis has a 0 in the x spot. So like in this example, if I'm going to try to find out where it crosses x, I'm going to have 2x minus 3, but I'm putting in a 0 for y, so that part disappears. And all I would do is take 6 divided by 2. So that happens to be the c value over the a value, which is why up here it's telling me, you know, what I'm gonna be dividing by. So I'm gonna go to 3 here. Then I'm gonna just erase this so I have a little bit of space. To find the other one, I'm going to do the exact opposite. I'm going to put a 0 in for the x, which cancels that out because 2 times nothing is nothing. And then to solve, I'm just going to divide by that b value. And then that is going to tell me where it will cross the other axis. So now you just plot these like points. So I go 1, 2, 3, and then I don't go up or down. And here I don't go left or right, I just go down 2. So this is going to be the line of that equation. That's easier to make this little table probably than to actually go and change it into slope-intercept form. But that's kind of up to you, whatever you think makes the most sense. But that's what these intercepts are. The x-intercept is going to be where it crosses x. The y-intercept is going to be where it crosses y. Hang on, I'm just looking at something. Okay, so I'm gonna do what this says. It says to rewrite this standard into slope-intercept form. So that means I need to get y alone because slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So this is just moving things around. I'm gonna say, all right, I'm gonna move my negative 2x over. There's basically 2 steps. You're gonna move the x part over to the other side. And then secondly, you're gonna divide by whatever number is with y. So here to move my x, I'm gonna add 2x to both sides. Here it cancels out, which was the whole idea. And then here I put it in front of the 12 simply because I know that I'm trying to get this format. So I'm gonna need something x and then plus or minus a number. So I'm gonna go through and now divide each piece by 4 because I'm doing my 2 steps. I moved the x to the right. Now I'm dividing by the number that was with y. And then I would just take it one at a time. This cancels out, so you have your y. 2 over 4 actually reduces to 1/2 for your slope. And then 12 over 4 reduces to 3. So if you had to graph this, you could graph this in a couple different ways. You could find the intercepts, or you could graph it using the y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to get this out of your way again. And let's start that from like the beginning here. So if I did this format, I would start at the y on 1, 2, 3, because that's my y-intercept. And my slope is 1/2. So up 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2. And so I end up with this line. Okay, if I made one of those little tables to do intercepts from the original standard form from over here, let's see how that would be different. If I put a 0 in for x, the x part would disappear and I would only have 4y equals 12. So I'd end up with a 3 there. And then here, if I had a 0 in for y, then in my equation looking back here, this part would disappear and I'd only have negative 2x equals 12. So dividing by negative 2x, I'd get negative 6. That's the same line, just in a different form. So when I plot the point 0, 1, 2, 3, I'm in the same spot. And then if I were to go back negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'm going to end up with an x-intercept that's on the same line. So I could have plotted this point and then draw the line according to this table. Personally, I think it's easier to use the table when I have this standard form. If you want to, you can change it to slope-intercept form, and then that way you're graphing them all in that slope-intercept form, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's see. We always have the joy of a word problem. The amount of money in your school lunch account is represented by y equals 130 minus 2.5x. X is going to be the number of lunches you've purchased, and y is the dollar amount that remains in your account. So how much money you have is 130 minus 2.5x, and x is the number of lunches that you have bought. So obviously that is going down because it's negative. But that's because as you buy lunches, the money in your account decreases. So it would have a negative slope. Now, how do I know that the 2.5 is my slope? Because it's in front of the x. So this is not asking about a math thing. This is saying, what do the slope and y-intercept represent? Like, what do they mean? So in this scenario, you lose $2.5 per lunch. So that would mean that the cost of a lunch is $2.50. So you're losing $2.50 from your account each time. The y-intercept is the number that's not attached to an x, so that's the 130. And since they did it as subtracting from the 130, that's a reminder of what you started with. Because keep in mind, y-intercept is like your starting amount, and so that's how much you started with. So you started with $130 in the account, and then you spent it $2.50 at a time. Write an equation for the line shown and then rewrite it in standard form. So the easiest equation to use is the slope-intercept, because you can look at the graph and you can see the slope and the intercept. So let's do that first. So I need y equals mx and then plus or minus b. So I can see that it crosses the y-axis at a -2, so that's going to go here. And then to count the slope from there to the next whole number point, they even wrote it in here. I'm going up 1, 2, 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4. So a rise of 3 over a run of 4. And it's positive because this graph, this line, is going up from left to right. So when I travel from this point to the other one, I'm going up and over. So positive. Okay. So standard form, you have to do two things, but you have to keep in mind we can't have fractions. So we're trying to keep in mind that we got to get rid of those later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my x over to the other side where it belongs, because remember, standard form has the x and then the y and then a number. So the only thing I can have on that right side is the number, which is -2. So I'm going to move the 3/4 x over by subtraction. So I'm going to have this plus the y that was there equaling -2, because if you're taking it away from this side, it's gone. And then you subtracted it over to the other side. So we have done this a little bit when we were doing solving, and you think about a number that would clear that out. Well, you have a 4 on the bottom, so just multiply everything by 4. So the first one would be 4 times -3, but that would give you -12 over 4x. So that reduces to just -3, because essentially those 4's cancel. But you can't just multiply that part by 4. If you're going to quadruple it, you have to quadruple everything. So now the y is 4 times bigger, and the constant is 4 times bigger. So then this is the same line as this was, based on looking at the graph. So don't make that harder than it is. Just go to the graph, take away the spot where it hits the y-axis, and that is at 1. So that's going to go at the end. It's at +1. Then this one goes down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. So that would be a slope of down 2, and I'm not going to write over 1 because I don't really have to. And then the x always goes next to the slope. Great. To get to standard form, I move the x every time. So this case, I need to add it. I can't really add x and y, so the x part sits out in front of the y part because that's what I'm trying to get to. And then on this side, I just have the 1 left. So in this case, I don't have a fraction and I don't have to do anything else. I'm just good to go. So this line in this graph looks like this in slope-intercept form and this in standard form. So what we're trying to do today is get a handle on the two different forms and how to move back and forth between them. So last, for day 1, is going to be graphing in slope-intercept form. I kind of talked up here about how to graph if it's in standard form by using the 0 under x and 0 under y. But here, it's almost easier. I'm going to start wherever it tells me to at the B value, and then I'm going to move according to that slope. So here I'm going to start at -3 on the Y, and I'm going to move as this tells me to, which would be up 2 over 1. So I'm going to start at -3 on the Y, so down 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to go from there up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. And you can keep doing that forever and ever if you wanted to for the rest of your life. Or you can get just enough points that you can make yourself a straight line. So because that was positive slope, my +2, I went up and over. Last thing, grand finale of day 1. This is telling me to start at 1 on the Y. And this is telling me to move down 2 because of the negative, and then over 3. So that negative is associated with the top for your rise up or down. So first I'm going to start on the y-axis at 1, a +1. Then I'm going to count down 2 over 3. Down 2 over 3. If I needed more points, I could also go up 2, back 3, because that's the same thing in the end. And then I'm going to connect those dots into what's hopefully a straight line. And if you are not making a perfectly straight line, it's a good idea to have a straight edge. And if you don't have one, then definitely plot specific points like I have. Like make it really obvious that you know to start here and you're going down 2 over 3, down 2 over 3. So if I can see those dots, even if your line is a little wobbly, I'll be able to tell that you knew what you were doing. So that is going to be a stopping point for my class. I think there's a lot of information in 2-3, so I'll make that video. That is going to be enough information for you to do the front of 2.3. And then I will make a video for day 2 that will help you do the back. Hope that helps. Bye.